what's going on, guys? So today on my ride I was kind of thinking about what's some good beginner bikes and kind of which ones I'm glad I didn't get. Now, a lot of people are going to recommend a lot of these really small underpowered bikes like the Honda Rebel 300, you know, the Ninja 250, things like that, just really small motorcycles. And I'll tell you what, I'm kind of glad that I did not get one. I got a 1986 Honda Magna V45, so that's a 700. I believe that's a 700cc. And personally, I'm handling the power just fine. I don't think it's too much. I don't think the bike's too heavy for me. Now, you got to keep in mind, like, this is all personal preference, so I'm just kind of giving my own thoughts and opinions here. Now, I feel like if I would have listened to people and bought the Rebel 300, I probably would have been pretty disappointed within the first week. I mean, I took this thing on the highway, I think like my third day of riding, so the Rebel probably would have been screaming on the highway. Now, I've never actually rode one, so I can't exactly say too much about it, but I'm sure it would have not had a good time on the highway. Now, personally, I think the Magna was perfect for me in terms of like power and weight. Now, I do think though that if you're just really trying to learn and you're not really too worried about if you're not going to keep the bike for a long time, then I would probably not worry about getting a big powerful bike. The Rebel 300, Ninja 250, those would all be fine if you're only planning on keeping the bike for maybe a year. But for me, I planned on keeping this bike probably until it dies on me. I didn't want to have to go through the whole process of shopping for another bike, test riding it, see what I like. You know, that's kind of just too much for me. I kind of wanted a medium-sized bike that can handle highway speeds and kind of just do what I want it to do. I don't need to be doing 150 miles an hour, you know. And so now that I'm still a new rider, so I figured I could talk about it while it's fresh in my brain, of all the motorcycles I've researched, and kind of give my opinion to you guys on what I think you guys should buy as your first motorcycle, kind of based off of what your body type is. And so with that being said, after riding for about a month now, I know what kind of requirements I would want in a new motorcycle if it was my first time buying it as a new rider. So I feel like for me, the number one thing is that I need to be able to flat foot the motorcycle. And that's mainly because you're gonna make mistakes as a new rider. Like, I've almost dropped this thing already countless times, and I was able to save it only because I could flat foot it. And so being able to flat foot the motorcycle is just gonna give you a little bit more room for error, and you won't be dropping the bike as much. Because if you're a short person and you get a tall sport bike, you know, you're gonna have to tippy toe a lot or even hang off to one side and only use one foot. And that's kind of just gonna make you struggle more and not enjoy the process of learning how to ride. Which brings me to my next point. I'm kind of gonna recommend cruisers over sport bikes if you're as your first bike. Mainly because the center of gravity is a lot lower. They're just more stable, they're easier to flat foot. Sport bikes, they're a lot taller and their center of gravity is up a lot higher. And so cruisers are just a lot more stable. Especially when you're learning how to ride, you know, they're just not as intimidating. Especially with the aggressive seating of sport bikes. If you get a powerful sport bike as your first motorcycle, it's very likely that you're just going to be in survival mode the whole time and you're not really going to be learning how to ride. And really the only, like, say you don't need a leader bike as your first bike. You just don't. This guy's gonna, okay, I thought he was gonna plow in front of me. I got kind of scared there. But you don't need a leader bike as your first bike, unless you just plan on showing it off to your friends and you don't really care about learning how to ride. That's the only reason you would need one. Now let's say you want a 600cc sport bike. Still not recommended, but it's still better than a leader bike. Like, I feel like if I were to buy a 600cc sport bike as my first bike, I wouldn't have had many issues with it, considering the power and stuff. You just have to know yourself. Like, if you're responsible enough, you're not going to rip the throttle all the time. It's not going to be that bad. But like I said, learning how to ride your very first motorcycle, no riding experience, I'm going to recommend the Cruiser. Now, if you don't feel confident enough to buy a medium-sized Cruiser, kind of like the Magna that I have, then by all means go for the Rebel 300, Rebel 500. But in my opinion, if I would have bought that as my first bike, I would have been pretty disappointed pretty quickly. Just because the Magna is a 700, the power to weight ratio is fine to me. I haven't had any issues with the power at all. And plus, in your motorcycle safety course, you're gonna have a lot of experience with the smaller bikes. You're gonna have a lot of experience with Groms, little Suzuki 250s. And you're kind of gonna see that they're very underpowered. Like, if you never plan on taking it on the highway, by all means go ahead and buy one, because those are perfect through town bikes. Like, say you live in New York City, then those little 250s, Rebel 300s, they're going to be perfect because it's going to allow you to get around town. They're tiny, they're nimble, you can throw them around a lot better. Sheesh, my fucking stomach is in my fucking asshole after that one. But yeah, in my opinion, medium-sized Cruisers are the best beginner bikes, just because they're not too powerful, the seating is comfortable, the center of gravity is low. And then the underpowered Cruisers like the Rebel are going to have a very difficult time on the highway and faster speeds, or like when you get more comfortable riding, you're just going to want more power, and they're going to be very underpowered. And I'm kind of just speaking from personal experience. My body type's average. I'm 5'9", 160 pounds. So let's say you're a smaller person, then you should definitely consider those bikes. Now let's say your options are between the Rebel 300, Rebel 500. I'm probably going to recommend the Rebel 500 just because they're the exact same bike, but the 500 just has more power. The 300 really, in my opinion, is just to learn on really quick and then switch. Now, with that being said, even though I recommend Cruisers as a first bike, a lot of people don't like them. It's as simple as that. And so, if you're gonna buy a sport bike as your first bike, make sure you sit on them and you're able to hold it up. You don't have to completely flat foot them, but make sure at least both feet are touching the ground. Because I promise you, you're gonna thank me later when you stall it and you almost drop it, things like that. Being able to flat foot it is gonna allow you to save the bike way more. And so like I said, it really is gonna all depend on your situation, because one of the things I had to consider when I bought this was that a lot of my commute and where I wanted to go most of the time was gonna require highways. If that's not the case for you, then yeah, definitely consider the Rebel 300 or something small like a Ninja 250. But regardless of what bike you get, your first bike will not ever be your last bike. I'm already planning on maybe next summer getting a different bike, and I just bought this thing a month ago. So yeah, those are just kind of my thoughts and opinions about your first bike, what to consider. Your height and weight, and you gotta know your own strength. That's also things to consider. But yeah, there's really no one good bike for everybody. It's all going to depend on your own situation. You got to go sit on the bikes, you know, test ride them if you know how to ride them. Do your research and, yeah, have fun with it. That's all. I'll see you next one.